All right, Math 1, graphing slope-intercept form. So first off, let's remember what is slope-intercept form. It is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. We remember that slope is the same thing as rise over run. A lot of the time whenever we talk about graphs, we're going to talk about rise over run with our slope. So let's start off with number 1. Now this one's kind of tricky, and in fact, all the first page of this is kind of tricky. This is y equals 1/4 x plus 0, right? You could add 0 to anything, so we're going to do that. So the slope, m, equals 1/4, and b is 0. So with slope-intercept form, we start off by saying that what is the y-intercept, and we put a dot on it. Well, the y-intercept is 0, so we're going to put a 0 on the y-axis, right? We look at the y-axis, the vertical axis, and we put a dot on it. If the b was like a 5, we'd put a dot up here on 5. Now, for 1/4, the slope, we're going to go rise 1, run 4. So we're going to start at our y-intercept right here at 0, where our dot is. We're going to go up 1, and we're going to go over 4. Right, up 1 over 1, 2, 3, 4. We put a dot. And you could also do the opposite of it, right? This is the same thing as -1 over -4. Right? We could add in those negatives, so we go down 1 and left 4. Right? Whenever you graph these, I'd like for you to try to use at least 3 points. So after we have our 3 points, we can draw our arrow, our line, and make sure that we have arrows on the end of it, right? Lines have arrows, segments do not. All right, and that's how we do number 1. Okay, I'm going to skip over number 2 and number 3 for just a second, and we're going to go on to number 4. I'll come back to those at the end of the video. Number 4, our m is -2/3, that's our slope, and b equals 2. Right? So our y-intercept is 2, so I'm going to put a dot on 2. Right? And then our slope is -2/3, or you could put the negative at the bottom and say it's 2 over -3. You could look at it either way. I don't really care which way you look at it. For starters, we'll look at the -2/3. -2, our rise is -2. That means go down 2. So 1, 2, and then run 3, 1, 2, 3. So I put a dot on that point, 0, 3. Now I can look at the second fraction that I wrote, the +2 over -3. So I'm going to go back to my y-intercept, and I'm going to go up 2, right, because +2, and left 3, 1, 2, 3, because of -3. Oops. And there's my line. There we are. If you ever notice that your points don't make a line, then you should probably just erase everything and start again, okay? Like if we had ended up having a point right here, if we had this point, and this point, then I would say, all right, we're just going to erase things and start again, because that wouldn't make a line. All right, let's look at number 5. So m, our slope, is -8. Let me rewrite that. -8/3, or you could think of it as 8 over -3, either way, and b is 3. So starting off, we look at our b equals 3, and we make a dot on the 3. Now let's look at our slope, -8/3. Well, -8 means our rise is -8. It goes down 8. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And our run is 3, so 1, 2, 3. So I put a dot there. Now, if we were to try to do another point on here, we'd have to go up 8, 1, 2, 3. Well, it gets off our graph. So we're good with just 2 points on this one. To make a line, you technically only need 2 points, but whenever we're graphing it, it makes it a lot easier if we have 3. So it's a good idea to normally just try to use 3, but if you can't, 2 is good. All right, there we are. Number 6, our slope m is negative 1 over 2. Our b is negative 3. Now one extra note here. Our slope is just the negative 1/2, not the x. Don't use the x. If I ask you what is the slope, don't put negative 1/2 x. Okay, make sure that you just use the coefficient. You only use the number there. All right, back to graphing. So we have our slope is negative 1 over 2, and our y-intercept is negative 3. So I'm going to first start off by putting a dot on the negative 3. Then my slope negative 1 over 2, so that means rise is down 1, and then run is 2. So put a point there. And if you wanted to, you could add another point in the right direction also. You could go, again, down 1 over 2. Down 1 over 2. You don't have to do it that many times, but I'm just trying to show you that slope works for any of the points. You can start off at any point. If they tell you that you have the point like, I don't know, 5, 4, like if they tell you that you have a line with a point 5, 4, and a slope of 3/2, you could graph that line without the equation. You don't have to start off with the y-intercept. That's just a really easy point to start off with. All right, I have at least 3 points here, so I'm good. I'm going to draw my line. And I have arrows on the end of it because lines have arrows. All right, that is graphing slope-intercept form. Now I want to look at these two lines here. I have y equals negative 4 and x equals negative 5. Well, y equals negative 4 is a horizontal line. And x equals 5 is a vertical line. Okay, so let's start off looking at y equals negative 4. Now, if we wanted to, we could write this in slope-intercept form. This would be y equals 0x minus 4, right? That's kind of like adding in 0, like what I did with number 1, right? Let's look back up at number 1. See how I added in 0? I'm adding in 0x here. Kind of doing the same thing, it just looks a little fancier. Well, this would tell me that my m is 0 and my b is negative 4. So I put a dot on negative 4. And then my slope is 0, which just means I go left and right. So I can put a point there, I can put a point there, I can put a point there. It doesn't really matter where you put the points. They just have to be horizontal with it. And we can draw our line. And that's our horizontal line. Notice that each point on this graph, on this line, has a y value of negative 4, right? This is our negative 4 spot. No matter where you go left and right, you're going to have a y value of negative 4, right? If we're talking about points, it's going to be like x negative 4, right, where that's our y. Okay. Now, 3, we're going to do the same thing, and you can kind of imagine how that's going to work. We're going to start off by looking at, well, x equals negative 5. So we're going to put a dot on negative 5 on our x-axis, right? Remember, our x-axis is the horizontal axis. And then just like what I said with right over here, we're able to say something similar about this one. We could say, well, this one's going to be negative 5 and then y, where we're going to have all these points always touching the negative 5 spot for the x. It doesn't matter where we go as long as we're on the negative 5 line. And then we graph our line, or we draw in our line rather, and there, we're done. So really, vertical and horizontal lines are a little bit easier to graph, at least I think. At least they're a little bit faster. But they are different. They're very different. So, all right, that is graphing lines in slope-intercept form and vertical and horizontal lines.